Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Mobile Testing Strategies for Maximizing ROI and Minimizing Headaches. I'm Ashwini Sathe. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Sauce Labs. We are very excited to kick off part one of the Mobile Testing Masterclass, and part two will be coming on May 30th. So we hope to see you there as well. So what's on agenda today? Yeah, we are going to be discussing some key market pressures and challenges. What are the infrastructure strategy trade-offs when you're testing on devices on premises versus taking a cloud-based testing approach? What are the key criteria to consider when choosing a solution, and how can Sauce Labs help? As I said, we'll move into Q&A at the end. And with that, I would like to welcome Sauce Labs speakers and test strategy experts who will be sharing their experience and insights with us today. Marcus and Diego, please take it off from here and introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marcus Merrell. Very glad to be here. Thank you all for attending. I'm a product marketer here at Sauce Labs, testing strategist, but I've been in the QA field for 25 years, writing automated testing for some fairly large companies with huge amounts of requirements, and member of the Selenium project. I'll pass it over to Diego.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Srini. Hey, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're super happy to have you today with us. I'm Diego. I am a staff software engineer, a developer advocate, a man of many hats at Sauce. I also have been in the testing ecosystem for a long time. I've been a developer most of my life. Then I switched to testing. I've been building infrastructure for a while, doing testing. So I hope that Marcus and we can share today some of our experiences through these following slides. Thank you for being here. We're going to start talking about the market pressures that will set the context for all the different things we want to share with you. I believe we can all agree that in the past years, we have seen how the digital experience is now the main human experience. An evidence of that is that over 60% of the traffic we see on the internet comes from mobile devices. And if you add to that in the recent years, we also have moved to a setup where at our jobs, we are either in a remote or hybrid setup, then trying to find a situation, an environment for us to test that digital experience properly is really, really challenging, right? And when we see how diverse the world is, how many people are using our applications, all the different devices they use, you can easily think how many combinations of devices, browsers, operating systems you need to actually configure to serve and give everyone the best digital experience. And we see that every year, every 6 months, or maybe even faster, we see new devices, new operating system versions, new demands from the audience, and there is a huge need for the speed to market factor. So before moving forward, we wanted to talk a bit about the different trade-offs that we have when you're thinking about a strategy between on-premises versus cloud-based devices. Let's start talking about testing infrastructure. I think this is very important to talk briefly about it because sometimes we jump about the topic of devices. We need devices, but why do we need something like that, right? Because when we have an infrastructure that is shared across teams, it basically speeds up how fast we can deliver software. It helps us to iterate faster, and the main point is to get feedback for all the changes we do to the application or the website. And when we have infrastructure that is reliable, that is pretty good at telling us how our application is doing, then we have more confidence and we feel more secure about delivering a great experience for our customers. And somehow when we get successful with testing, we see the need for extend our testing, then we see the opportunity of scaling up, and we need to scale up, then a robust, very solid and extensible testing infrastructure is key for those goals, I would say. Have you had the experience of doing something like this, Marcus, in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of done it every way you can imagine. I think I've made all the mistakes and finally decided that it was not worth our team's time to sort of try to build this thing ourselves. Releasing without without some amount of confidence that we've tested on a combination of real devices and all that. It's just, I've been through it. I think you've already covered it. I mean, it's really clear.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I basically got started into testing. So I'm Colombian and I moved to Germany, and one of my first jobs was to be a test automation engineer, and I quickly got into infrastructure. And that's when I started to understand what was important when you were building a testing infrastructure. The first thing was to think about the hardware that you need. In the case of mobile devices, if you just want to do virtual devices, you need emulators and simulators, and you also need real devices. But to configure those things, you need the proper software. And if you want to get real value from that infrastructure, you need to figure out how to get things like videos, storage, maybe how to integrate properly with your continuous integration, continuous deployment solution, and so on. So let's get a bit more into the detail of these three different considerations, and let's see what we can share with you. I remember that when I was building my own infrastructure for the company I was working, we had to start thinking about virtual devices. And the first thing we bumped into is that we either needed real machine, real hardware, or cloud VMs that had nested virtualizations. They were very, very expensive. So we had to invest a lot of money in that. Then we started measuring how much each virtual device needed. So at the time, we saw that we needed around 3 CPUs, 3 gigabytes of RAM, so a lot of resources to run one single device. And then if you wanted to play with simulators, with Apple applications, then you needed Apple hardware, and that was really expensive at the time, and that still holds true. We did some nice, interesting things there, but then we also wanted to do some real devices, right? And then we hit a bottleneck because basically we could only scale up to the point of how many of them we could buy. And then when the new thing was being released, like it was not really easy to get the new one because our customers were using, like, Christmas came, new devices, and then it was really challenging to get the new ones before time to get them tested.
Yeah, I mean, this is a case where I've had a desk before with a stack of Mac Minis on it, and then not only do you run through, having to procure these Mac Minis, you also run into license restrictions for the number of devices you can run at a single time, even if your hardware can handle it. But also the idea that every August, September they release a new set of iPhones, so you go and you procure $20,000 for 20 devices. And then you're just going to have to do the same thing next August. And then there's a proliferation of Android manufacturers. So you have to account for a certain number of each one of those. So it becomes a real headache real fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I came to realize that factors they're saying about the different Android manufacturers, because, okay, like we had the hardware, and then we were going to start configuring all the software ecosystem for this infrastructure. And then we could install Android Studio, which was like rather easy, Xcode as well, Appium, Chrome driver. But then when we realized that most of our customers had a Samsung device, for example, and the emulator we were using was like the pure Android, it was not actually the same thing that our customers were using. So we had to put some effort into that, configure the software and the hardware properly in a way that we would have a similar experience. But again, like, handling all this initial setup was fun at the beginning, but then it became more and more challenging because we had to maintain that over time.
And all that time is spent not focusing on your product and your customers.
And I think at that point, we were happy with the result because we had something we could use. But then at some point when we were running tests, we were not getting much in return. Like, you were able to run a test, but then when the test was failing, we were thinking, okay, like, can I get like the screenshot of like when the test failed? Can I get the logs to see what the application was doing? Can I get a video at least, to get some evidence and show the developer that this was failing? And then as time passes, like, today applications, they also reproduce audio. The way to authenticate to applications has changed. You have like Face ID, you have Touch ID, different ways. And like this is not coming out of the box when you build your own infrastructure. And it's just like challenges coming more and more when you build your own thing. And that's the point where we started to think if this was making sense or not.
Yeah, I know. When I've had this trouble in the past, we have basically a box that's purpose built to handle a bunch of devices, and it's sitting on someone's desk or on some empty desk. And it's got eventually over a 2-year period, it's got 20 or 30 devices in it, but it only has 10 charging cables. So when you go to the box to get the iPhone 7 because someone reported a problem with an iPhone 7 and nobody has an iPhone 7, you go to that machine and the iPhone 7 hasn't been plugged in a year. So you plug it in and it takes forever to charge because the battery is worn out by this time. And then you find out that the operating system is also many, many years old. So you have to upgrade the operating system. And then you have to install your new version of the app new version of the app that's still compatible with the latest version of the operating system that it can handle. Then you have to dust the thing off because a bunch of people have been handling it and you don't want to handle somebody else's device. And at that point, you are 45 minutes to an hour at least into an exercise where you're just trying to get a test run on your app. And you've wasted all this time handling all these devices that don't help your customers at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes that's what you question yourself, like, how am I delivering value to my team? How am I helping myself to grow? And yeah, it's like an endless circle. So now that we thought a bit about the different considerations, we can jump into the key challenges when we decide to build our own infrastructure. And I think this is an amazing slide that shows us how quickly the ecosystem is moving, which is great. Like how quickly the different device manufacturers are releasing a new phone, how quickly browsers are updating because there are maybe security updates, so they patch it really quickly and then there is a release. How often mobile operating systems are being released with new features, new cool things that we can do. And together with that, how frameworks are being updated to properly update those, properly test those operating systems. And this slide is just the last year, January 2023 to January 2024. And one of the interesting things that we tend to forget is that, yeah, okay, I will find a way to update and I will just roll it out. But what we often miss, what you usually don't think about is that you need to have a testing infrastructure, like a staging area where you test your updates. If you just release, for example, iOS 17 on your own infrastructure, there might be issues, and then people who are using that infrastructure will bump into those issues and they will be blocked. So you actually need to test the testing infrastructure before sharing this with everyone else. And as I think we have been talking with Marcus, it's just like a thing that goes on and on. It's like something that really never ends. It's something that you don't start, work on it for a month, but then you have to continue on it for several weeks, months, and ideally years.
Yeah, I want to add just by the way, Ashwini put this slide together and it's great. This slide always tells to me the story that you are either going to spend some number of hours per dot on this slide maintaining that, or your infrastructure falls out of date and adds risk to your business because it's either got older versions of things that don't map up to what's going on right now, or in some cases, Log4j was actually on this slide a year ago because that's when the vulnerability discovered. It's rolled off since it's a rolling 12-year. But Log4j, you introduced security vulnerabilities by not keeping your infrastructure up to date. So you're either spending hours or you're not up to date. In both cases, there's a huge amount of either risk or effort that's happening. And once again, not helping your customer. Make sense?
Definitely. And I think when we think about all these updates, we tend to miss, we only think about the tip of the iceberg. That's what I wanted to say. which is like we see that, okay, we can get it started, we can buy a few devices, we can assign some people to work on it in a temporal way, but then we do like a quick math of saying, okay, how many people do we need, how many devices, how many hours do we need to invest on this, so this is how much this will cost. But then we forget all the rest of the different items that we're not budgeting for. And I think Marcus already mentioned some, like when you want to buy a new device in your company, it's not just like, I want a new device, and you go to the Apple store or you go to the different media outlet to buy a new Android device. You have to procure it, people have to approve it, and it's like a lot of work that ends up just being in the shape of like you waiting on a seat for someone to approve. And then yeah, you need like to go and then check that the operating system is correct. You have to configure the device to avoid being auto-updated because that's what they're made for. And yeah, like people dedicated to this work, people plugging these devices, checking that they're all working, that if there is a pop-up, like you go and close it. And it's basically a lot of work in the sense that you need to make sure that these devices are in the same place, well maintained, secure, and there is someone around to be always there for them to be usable.
Yeah. And I'm going to just interrupt the flow for a second to answer a question that was posted in the chat. How do we handle situations like batteries that bulge due to the fact that these devices are in much higher use than others? And what was the other thing? So there's unlimited use. Yeah. What is the mitigation plan? We have people in a data center who every single day perform multiple visual inspections on our phones, and they can tell puffy phones. They can see when batteries are getting out of hand. Without going into too much detail, these folks can replace an iPhone battery faster than just about anyone. And we maintain that, but the point is that we maintain it and that you don't have to. It happens exactly the way it happens with you if you were doing it, except that we are experts in it, and we handle the burden for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And most of the time, we also have like devices completely new, just waiting in the shelf, like in case something just breaks down. So you just like plug in, like removing one and then plugging the new one, because that's the process of having things ready for you all. And one thing I felt very personal about all these things we wanted to share with you, which is what I went through. So this is basically a slide that I wrote myself, and when we think about having a testing infrastructure is because we want to have a place where we can guarantee that the experience we provide to our customers is the best one, that they really feel delighted with our product, they enjoy using our app, our website. But then one thing that is often forgotten is that there is another customer that lives inside our company, and that's us. That's the tester, the developer, the QA, because we want to innovate, we want to release things as fast as possible, we want to do things in a cool way. And when we have to, we have to invest time in maintaining infrastructure, figuring out why the new iOS release, why the new Android release is not working, why this device is down, how to replace a battery, then we get stuck, we frustrate ourselves, we think that, oh, this is not where I want to spend my time. And then, when a customer is frustrated, they start looking for a different product. And when a developer, when a QA gets frustrated, they start looking for a different job. So when I have a team of testers, of developers, that they need a good, solid, robust infrastructure to test, they are also my customers, and I have to pay attention to them. They have to be happy, and they have to be able to be focusing on what delivers value for our team and our product, so our customers keep enjoying a delightful and great experience.
Nothing to add. You nailed it.
So this is something we were talking briefly during the last days, and so one of the things that usually happens when we're trying to talk to our manager, to our director of the area, like like we're developers, we're testers, we understand why this matters, but sometimes people above our levels, they need to understand this in their language, right? So, for example, we know that we want to innovate. We want to be really, really fast in the things we do, and we want to get quick feedback. And we want to understand how this increased risk, how this costs, like, how much hours how many hours we're spending in maintaining this infrastructure, all the hours we're spending just waiting for procurement to be done, how the lack of resources in devices and infrastructure is holding us back by like not being able to iterate fast. How do we translate into that? So, for example, an easy way to say, to translate all these things, like if I am slower, if I'm not able to deliver and support the latest device and the latest operating system that our customers are using, it's quite easy to see an increase on the churn rate from our customers. If my app is not really performing in a great way, if it's not delivering a great experience for us, all of us, when we go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, like maybe the indices of ratings, NPS are going to go down. And it's easy to translate all these things that are slowing us down to business metrics so people understand us when we're talking to them. And then we can easily translate the need for something that is robust and solid for us to iterate and innovate much faster.
Cool. This is where I take over. So what we're really trying to talk about here is not only just helping you with this pain, but also like why you're here. You're here at a Sauce Labs webinar. So we're going to talk about Sauce Labs. I think it's important also to point out that Diego and I started off as customers. I was a customer for a very long time of Sauce Labs before I came to work here. And I came to work here partly because I had tried so many times and failed to solve this problem that it became obvious to me that infrastructure doesn't just mean machines in a closet somewhere. Infrastructure means a software layer that's very sophisticated and reverse engineered to manage devices and data in such a way that is shockingly difficult to do. You really think you can just. I think I've built 5 Selenium grids in my career, the last one being 2012, and they were all a combination of machines that were lying around or machines that I had to go off the shelf and buy. And eventually they kind of took over my career because at the worst possible time on a Friday afternoon, some developer decided to push some code. We ran the Selenium grid, which is our big confidence maker to make sure that we understand that our software, whether our software is good or not. And then something goes wrong with the Selenium grid. And now we are the bottleneck. And it costs me a whole weekend to try to maintain, this device farm or something like that. So the idea that this burden could be removed from me really became kind of a point of passion that made me realize that, that I want to go work for a place that's helping people solve this problem. We want you to focus on innovating and getting your products to market faster and testing at scale anytime, anywhere, without having to learn how to reverse engineer iOS to do biometric injection, because that is not your job. Your job is to make your customers be delighted at your software. And so I think it's also important to point out, like I referred to earlier, there's another question. We will maintain the operating system versions of these devices. We will also leave some in an older operating system because we know that occasionally, if there isn't a security patch involved, there's an operating system that's considered stable on maybe an older device and people don't update for whatever reason. So we keep Apple devices on these older operating system versions because I don't know if y'all know this, but once you update an Apple device from one OS to the next, even if it's a point release, you cannot go back. That chip is hardwired. So we keep a lot of Apple devices in the old operating system just so that you can have access to those devices on demand within 60 seconds or something like that. And so it gives us the ability to not only scale up but give you a diversification of devices that lets you reproduce issues that may come in from different sectors. A lot of it also might depend on the context that you're in. If you work for a company like a healthcare insurance company provider or a elder care facility, your audience and your device mix up is going to be different from if you work for a company like TikTok. So we have to keep those devices around to make sure that people with different demographic needs are going to be able to test on, different kinds of devices at different scales. Anything to add there, Diego?
No, I just wanted to quickly mention that I think we went through the same path in our careers. Like I got a job in the biggest e-commerce in Germany, and then I also went to the path like we actually were Sauce Labs customers, and we built a local infrastructure. We quit Sauce, and then I left the company, and there was no one maintaining that. And today they're again Sauce customers. So yeah, I was the bottleneck. I was like. I was the reason why they came back to Sauce, basically, because there is no one else to maintain that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in QA. We don't want to be the bottleneck. We want to get this product out the door. Yeah. You can read this slide. We'll send this deck out and these slides to you. But essentially, I wanted to just point out that I'm a big believer in shifting left. I'm also a big believer in shifting right. I believe, though, that when you do your highest risk testing, usually security testing and performance testing, stuff like that, it's all the way to the right. But also people do their sort of their functional testing right before the product goes out the door. And we're trying to pull that in, reel it in, make it easier for people to test earlier, especially on something like an emulator simulator, because there's a lot of consternation out there in the market right now about whether or not it's worth it to test on emulators and simulators. And to me, it's kind of obvious and ridiculous that we were even having this debate because, almost the entire world is virtualized at this point. We're all testing on emulators. These Zoom machines that we're on right now, they're running hosted in the cloud on emulated machines. Emulators are every bit as good as real devices to a point, the point at which you actually have hardware on the device that is interacting with the software, where you absolutely need to start testing with real devices. But in the main, your job is to make sure that the code in your app functions against the APIs in the backend servers in a way that probably 60% of the time has nothing to do with the hardware itself. And so for a fair amount of time and for a huge amount of scalability and parallelism, you can use emulators and simulators to scale up this testing and do a job of testing your business logic through the app with an simulated device. And then when you get to the point where you need to test things like location services and biometrics and image injection, cameras, all that kind of thing, then you use a real device. So that's kind of my view on emulation. Go ahead into the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just wanted to mention that there has been a debate of shift left and shift right, and I think we are all finding that there has to be a balance. Like you can scale up when you go left, and then also see that your application is working well after shifting right. Yeah.
I mean, just as kind of a side note, this could be its own webinar entirely, but I mean, Diego and I are both leaders in the Selenium community, and we'll be the first to tell you that Selenium is not the only one testing tool. Real devices are not the only one testing device. Like, you need to test different things at different levels to test the layer that they're working on the most efficiently and the most satisfactorily, I guess I'd say. So we commissioned a survey a while back that shows that there is actually tremendous, like 270% ROI. Honestly, I believe that's a little bit low, but that's the number that we can quantify via survey information. And we see, some companies reporting even something like a 95% reduction in issues escaping to production. And that is, honestly, that's kind of the reason we do this job, isn't it? To stop issues from escaping to production, minimize risk. QA time savings, developer time savings, those are all in service to keeping escapes from going out the door and getting your product to market faster. Once again, I'm not going to read the slide. You'll have it after. So next one. What we're seeking to do, and the reason I came to Sauce Labs, is because infrastructure is sort of the bottom layer that you need to have in order to make sure your testing is done. Diego and I are both fervent advocates of open source, and this is a unique position that we have in the industry where we can still full-throatedly advocate for open source and tell you there's not really an open source way to go buy 150 iPhones. It's just not possible. So we're going to use our open source and wrap it in this infrastructure that we've built out for you and let you use the infrastructure with our software enablement on top of it to do cross-browser, mobile app, live testing, visual testing, all on top of the world-class infrastructure that we built out through this, reverse engineering and stuff that you don't want to spend your time doing. What we're really trying to move through in our future is insights and observability and telling you information about your software that you maybe didn't know. One real quick point, and we really have to get to Q&A, is that we've incorporated something called error reporting into our real device cloud, which is an SDK that we inject into your app that tells you about crashes and stack traces that come out through your app that you may not even see surfaced in the user interface. So we had an interesting survey not a survey, actually a study of the data of the tests that were being run on our platform that showed that 20% of mobile device tests that were reported as passing tests actually had crashes and stack traces that were not reported into the user interface. So we intercepted these stack traces within the phone, kind of between the API and the app layer, and showed you that there might be states of this software that you don't really understand, that your tests are executing successfully, but that you're not seeing because they don't get surfaced in the user interface. And we make you aware of that in a way that no other company can do. And this is another example of software on top of the hardware that you don't want to spend your time building, but you get it through Sauce Lab.
So one question is around how shift left testing is achieved with real device, like testing apps with small components. How does Sauce Labs help here?
Diego, you might have a slightly better handle on that, but I can try to give it a shot if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I can complement if you want.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that installing, an early version of an app, a developer version of an app onto, like a real device in our cloud, we make it pretty easy. I mean, you can upload the app and you can run some functional tests. You can also do some manual checking of the app just to make sure that it works. So you can log in through Chrome or Firefox, dial up a version of an iPhone 14 or 15, upload the app to it, and within a few minutes, you can actually start clicking around and poking around. That is a version of shift left, even though it doesn't necessarily tie into CI/CD, but it is a developer before they hand it off to QA exploring an app on a real device before they are able to hand it off. I mean, that is a version of shift left, and that you can introduce automation to if you'd like, but usually at that point, it might be for automation because it's still changing, and you want to wait until it's stabilized a bit before you actually start writing automated scripts.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Another one here, and I think, Marcus, you'd love to answer this one. Do we have any capability for testing things like accessibility compliance with WCAG or verifying screen reader output?
I believe we just released this morning an integration with Axe DevTools Mobile, which gives you the ability to test accessibility signals in our real device cloud if you have a license for Axe DevTools Mobile, which we can get you in contact with a free trial and sign up through all that stuff. But it's something that we just put out this morning. We're actually quite keen on accessibility, and hopefully later in the year we're going to announce a little bit more of a comprehensive story around it. But right now we are offering Axe DevTools Mobile through our real device cloud as of today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I also sent a link to the product announcement in the answers, so you can definitely look at it, Krupa. Okay, we'll probably take one more question here. How does a cloud-based testing platform like Sauce Labs ensure the security and compliance of mobile applications?
Well, our cloud is SOC 2 Type 2, as well as SOC 3, ISO 27001 and 27701 compliant. We have the security certifications and wherewithal to guarantee that your data is protected and your apps will not, leak or anything like that. We protect all that through our security processes. It's a big focus of ours, and I think we're still the leaders in this space.
Absolutely. And we are going to follow up around all the questions. We'll send you more information to make sure that you're fully satisfied with sort of the content you're looking for. We can take one more question. How is Sauce Lab supporting companies to improve the developer experience today? I know, Diego, you also touched a bit upon it in your section. So if you want to highlight anything else around the developer experience for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one I can circle back on Marcus' first answer, which is like giving them the opportunity to try out whatever changes they're doing, or maybe a completely new app, in like using live testing. So sometimes when you are developing an application, you are iterating so fast, or you're making so many changes locally that you're not sure about, like releasing something or pushing something. And then there is a chance for you to test this, do a live test in Sauce Labs, and you don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to plug a device. You don't need to deploy something you just need to upload the application to Sauce Labs and then run a live test to have a first impression. And when you can get that feedback so quickly, it's like your experience of developing and flowing and iterating on your software development lifecycle process, it's just much more easier, and you can actually focus on delivering value instead of like figuring out how to plug a device and see how you can test what you're testing right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think we did have some questions left, but as I mentioned, we are definitely going to follow up on those later. That's all the time we had for webinar today. On behalf of Sauce Labs, we really want to thank you all for your excellent questions, attendance, and participation here. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you.